know what Peter said? That Peter who had denied Jesus a little earlier, he stood firmly and he said, we ought to obey God rather than men. He wasn't afraid. And they were amazed at the courage and the boldness, and they took knowledge that they had been with Jesus. We don't have to be afraid when Christ is with us. You know, several years ago, I was pastoring a little church, and one of my deacons elbowed me, and he said, you know who that is? And I said, no. And he pointed to an old couple that was making their way up to the front of the church. He said, that's a DESMOND DOSS. You know, the war hero. Got the Congressional Medal of Honor. And I was really excited because our family had just read the book together. Ended up his wife, Frances, had family that were members of our church, and so we got to know each other. And then he'd come to Sacramento. I saw him different places when I preached back in Tennessee. Just an incredible man. I don't know if you've heard the story, but a dedicated Seventh-day Adventist Christian who actually volunteered during World War II in 1942 as a conscientious objector. He says, I want to help. I want to do my part. I'm thankful for our freedoms, but I'm not going to take up a gun and hurt anybody. I'll be a medic. And you know, the recruiters, they'll say, sure, no problem, whatever you want. I don't know if any of you have been in the service, but recruiters will promise you the moon. And you say, you know, yeah, and I want to fly jet. Sure, no problem. And you end up cleaning the latrine. And they say, oh, no gun? Yeah, no problem. So he signed up. And finally, when his officers, even the medics, had to carry a weapon. And when they found out that, first of all, he said, I won't do any unnecessary work on Sabbath. And the recruiter said, oh, yeah, no problem. And they said, yeah, that is a problem. When he finally joined, he said, well, I can't do it. And they threatened him, and they put him in the brig, and they made him peel potatoes and clean the latrine, and he said, I'm not going to carry a gun. Can you imagine that? And the other soldier said, you mean you won't defend me? When I'm on the battlefield, I can't count on you because you're not going to be able to defend me. And he was ostracized, and he was ridiculed, and they gave him a very hard time, but he stood for his convictions. You know, to be a Christian man doesn't mean you got big muscles. To be a mighty man of God, it never says that the guys who were David's mighty men were muscular. But they had conviction, and they had followed David. The Bible says David was handsome. Never said he was buff. Did you know that? So Doss stood for his convictions. Finally, they got on the battlefield, and they found out what he was really made of. He had an inner strength. And some of the people that were big mouths on the battlefield ran when the bullets started to fly, but not Doss. And I want to just read you the citation that was given to him. And this was issued by the government back when he received his medal. It says, he was a company aid man, a medic, when the 1st Battalion assaulted a jagged escarpment. They just made a movie about this called Hacksaw Ridge, 400 feet high. As troops gained the summit, a heavy concentration of artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire crashed in, afflicting approximately 75 casualties and driving others back. PFC, Private First Class Doss, they would never promote him, refused to seek cover and remained in a fire-swept area, I mean swept by enemy fire, a blizzard of bullets. And he refused to seek cover with the stricken, carrying all 75 casualties one by one to the edge of the escarpment and lowering them on a rope-supported leader down the face of a cliff to friendly hands. On May 2nd, he exposed himself to heavy rifle and mortar fire in rescuing a wounded man 200 yards forward of the enemy line. On the same escarpment, 2 days later, he treated 4 men who had been cut down while assaulting a strongly defended cave, advancing through a shower of grenades to within 8 yards of enemy forces in a cave's mouth, where he dressed his comrades' wounds before making 4 separate trips under constant fire to evacuate them to safety. On May 5th, those who reported later, when he got his medal, said this was supernatural. He had something taking care of him, because there was a withering blizzard of bullets going all around him, and they didn't hit him. You stand up for God, he'll stand up for you. May 5th, he unhesitatingly braved enemy shelling and small arms. To assist an artillery officer, he applied bandages and moved his patient to a spot that offered protection from small arms fire, while artillery and mortar shells fell close by, painstakingly administering plasma. Later that day, when an American was severely wounded by fire from a cave, PFC DOSS crawled to him where he had fallen 25 feet from the enemy position, rendered him aid, carried him 100 yards, that's a football field, to safety. He was my size. While constantly exposed to enemy fire, on May 21, in a night attack on high ground near Surrey, he remained in exposed territory while the rest of the company took cover, fearlessly risking the chance that he would be mistaken for an enemy. Rather than call another man to his aid after he was injured, he gave his gurney to someone else. Time and time again, he was protected. Finally, they threw a grenade in a group he was at. He went and kicked it away. He was wounded by the grenade, as well as being wounded by bullets. Gave his stretcher to someone else. While he was waiting for a stretcher, he was hit again, third time by sniper fire, crawled 3 football fields by himself, splinted his own arm. Incredible courage. Now, do you think any of the other soldiers teased him after that? They gave him the highest medal that can be awarded an American for bravery because he stood for his convictions. And our time together this weekend, when we're talking about what it means to stand with courage, we're not talking about military battles. We're talking about standing in a culture where Christians are under attack. And I just wonder, as we close, how many of you want to say, by God's grace, I want to be one of his mighty men that will stand for the right, though the heavens fall? Why don't we stand together and let's ask him as we close. Dear Father, we pray that you will give us that courage that we talked about. Be with each of these men and bless them with your Spirit. And I pray that you'll help us to be men of courage that stand for the right in these last days.